Welcome to my Week 2 review of college football. It was a fantastic, again, another fantastic week of college football after the season kicked off last week. A ton of upsets last week, and that trend continued this week with some big names going down. Of course, the biggest one, probably that Ohio State game with a surprise loss to almost everybody. Most Oregon fans, I don't think were expecting a win. Surprise loss to everyone in that Oregon game. So let's get right into it. We're going to go over some of the top news of the week, which for me is going to be the Big Ten and the Big 12, their main champions, or several of their main champions, at least two for the Big 12 and one for the Big 10, going down this week. Are they out of the playoff hunt? We're going to look at the Pac-12, a good performance this week, especially considering that Oregon game, of course, being the top one, and Pac-12 kind of getting their feet underneath them. We're going to look at some big upsets. We're going to review those. We're going to look at the FCS continuing to upset FBS teams. An incredible performance by FCS this season. We're going to look at my surprise teams of this week. We're going to look at the top 25. I'm not going to give you a top 25, but we're going to take a look at the top 25 of the AP poll. Look at who's out, who's in, big movers, who I thought should have been in versus who ended up coming in instead, who moved too much, who moved too little. We're going to end with some quick hitters around the league. So let's get right into it. So first off, Big 10 and Big 12, are they out of the playoff hunt? Well, number 9 ISU and number 15 Texas lost. Iowa State losing to Iowa, and Texas, who was a surprise one, losing to Arkansas in a really shocking upset. And then the Big 10, number 3, OSU losing to number 12, Oregon. Now, I do a weekly preview of the top 10 games of the week where I present my predictions against the over-under and really who's going to be winning each game. And I got to tell you, I'm mad with myself for this one. In my preseason preview of the college football season, when I went through every single conference, I actually called Oregon beating Ohio State. I did. I called them beating Ohio State. I gave my reasons why. I thought they were good reasons. But coming into this game, in that preview of the weekly preview of the top 10 games, I chickened out. Mostly it had to do with Oregon's performance against Fresno State. I just didn't think that they put up a performance in that game that would be able to go up against Ohio State, because Fresno State's good. I like Fresno State, but they're no Ohio State. Ohio State is definitely better than Fresno State, and I figured for sure Oregon, if they could barely get past Fresno, is going to lose to Ohio State, and I chickened out. I shouldn't have done it. It's the second week I did that. The first week, I actually called in my preseason preview that Virginia Tech would beat North Carolina, but in my weekly preview, I called North Carolina winning that game. So no more. If you watch my weekly preview videos, you're going to notice a change. I'm going to be calling those upsets that I called at the beginning of the season, and we'll see if I start getting back on track there. But back into the discussion here. So Ohio State losing to Oregon, I think that definitely puts them out of the playoff hunt here. Oregon just doesn't have a strong enough schedule where they could go undefeated, and then Ohio State, again, lacking that strong enough schedule to where Oregon could go undefeated and get high enough in the rankings that Ohio State, with one loss to them, could also get into the playoffs. Oregon would have to basically finish number 1, I think, based on the patterns that have existed before. Oregon would basically have to finish number 1, and Ohio State would then have a chance of getting that number 4 slot with a loss to the number 1 team. But I just don't see that happening. Now, yes, Ohio State managed to get into the playoffs in 2014 with a loss to Virginia Tech, second week of the season. And here we are again, Ohio State losing second week of the season. So it's not out of the realms of possibility. Ohio State is definitely still in the hunt. But when you talk about the probabilities, it is a stacked hunt this year. There are a lot of good teams in the competition for that. And not to mention the Big Ten's own Iowa, who Ohio State's going to have to get past now to be able to get into conversation again for that. I just think that Ohio State is out of the hunt here, but we'll have to see. Long season, we're only 2 weeks in. The season's not over, Buckeye fans. We'll have to see if the Ohio State University, as you guys like to say, can get back into it. So Big Ten, not out of the hunt yet. Iowa is a real playoff contender. They really are, which is a shocker. I mean, I don't think that any Hawkeye fans would have expected that. Hawkeye fans, you're pretty diligent about your team. You're pretty fanatical, so maybe you did. But the rest of the nation does not view Iowa as a playoff team. They're not. When you think about the blue blood playoff teams, you know, the Alabamas, the Georgia's always in contention. The Texas A&Ms. I'm going through the SEC, but they're the best conference. The Ohio States. the Oregon on occasion, the Clemsons. When you talk about these teams, Iowa's not in that same conversation. They really aren't, but they are proving to be an outstanding team this year. I think they have a legitimate shot. We're going to talk about them when we get to my top 25. I think they should have moved up higher than they did, but they are a legitimate team this year who has had two big wins to start the season and is proving themselves not just in their conference but outside of it with a big win against Iowa State here. Penn State is also technically a contender for the playoffs here. I just don't see them getting past Iowa, and I just don't see them with the schedule that they have being a legitimate contender right now. But they're undefeated, and they're in the top. They're one of the top teams in the nation right now, so they're definitely still in the hunt there. But I think Iowa's probably the real legit one here. Now, Big 12, so two of its teams. It is down to one legitimate playoff contender. Iowa State and Texas both out. Now, yes, Oklahoma State is still undefeated. Kansas State is still undefeated. I believe there might be a few other Big 12 teams that are undefeated, but those two teams I know for sure are coming to this week 2-0. But neither of them, they're both outside of the rankings, and neither of them have played in a way that says, you look at them and say, that's a playoff team right there. And so I think really when you're looking at Oklahoma, they're the last team right now that's in the top 10 for the Big 12. And they're really the last team right now that is contending for that playoff spot. But with both of those teams going down, Iowa State and Texas, and honestly, neither team playing very well so far to start the season. Really, nobody in the Big 12 playing dominantly or playing very well to start the season right now. Definitely looking, when you look at the grand scheme of things overall, looking like one of the weaker conferences in college football right now, but definitely ahead of the ACC, who's just been terrible. But definitely looking like one of the weaker conferences. You have to ask yourself, if you came down to the end of the year and you said, say, an undefeated Oregon, and then a Georgia or Alabama and whoever's second in that division with one loss between one of those teams, 1, 2, 3, would you take Oklahoma over, say, an undefeated Iowa? No, I don't think you would. And I don't think you would take Oklahoma over a one-loss SEC team whose one loss is to the potential number 1 or number 2 team in the country. So Oklahoma here, I think it's legitimate to question whether or not the Big 12 is out of the playoff hunt right now, especially considering how Oklahoma has played this year so far with that narrow loss to Tulane. Of course, they turned it around last week, beating a nobody. I believe they played an FCS opponent, but they beating a nobody. You have to legitimately question whether the Big 12 is out of the playoff hunt here. And I think when we look down at the end of the season and we're talking about those top 4 teams, even an undefeated Oklahoma, I think, might be on the outside looking in. But it's going to see how well the Big 12 can turn their season around, how dominant Oklahoma can be going forward. But Spencer Rattler, a Heisman contender still, but Oklahoma not looking like a playoff team right now. All right, so that's the first section. On to the next here. And I do apologize. I forgot last week, and I'm going to do it in my videos going forward. I totally blanked it. I like to do postcards telling you which section we're on to next, but I totally forgot it, and we're just going to cruise on. I don't want to have to. I've already done 8 minutes in, and I think I've said some pretty good stuff, so I don't want to have to reshoot that. So we're just going to go ahead with where we're at. All right, so Pac-12 rising and falling is the headliner here for the Pac-12 today. UCLA last week having a great win over LSU, and Oregon having a great win over Ohio State. But then the rest of the Pac-12 has really just been garbage. So I kind of faked you out there talking about the Pac-12 being back. Colorado looked good. They're not garbage. They barely lost by only 3 points to Texas. But USC got beat up. Self-defeating there as far as the Pac-12 goes. Got beat up by Stanford, unranked Stanford, or prior to this week, unranked Stanford. Utah lost to BYU. Arizona lost big to San Diego State. Washington lost to Michigan, and Cal lost to TCU. So the Pac-12 took a beating this week against the other conferences, not just Power 5, but also Group of 5, with Arizona losing there to San Diego State and Utah losing to BYU. Do we still call BYU a Group of 5? Just kind of taking a side question here. I've never really considered them a true Group of 5 team. I like Boise State or some of these other top quote-unquote group of 5 teams, I've always seen them as basically a Power 5 who's been relegated in the mindset of the national landscape to a group of 5 anyway, especially when you talk about BYU. I mean, Boise State has a legitimate argument, but BYU has a better one because BYU has played basically at least half a Power 5 schedule every single year. That's why they haven't gone undefeated every season besides last year when they played nobody, because they played such tough competition. I mean, if you look at BYU playing, and they're not cherry picking the losers. They're playing some of the top Power 5 teams, and being close in those games. So yeah, but as it stands right now, without being recognized as a Power 5 nationally and not being in the Big 12 yet. They've been accepted, but they aren't actually officially in. It is a group of 5 loss there by the Pac-12. So not a good week on the back end, but the champions of the Pac-12, which right now is standing at UCLA and Oregon as those top 2 teams, are playing very, very well. So Pac-12 making a name for themselves against elite competition from the other conferences, against those top teams in those other conferences. It's going to be interesting what the Pac-12 can do going forward. I definitely anticipate the Pac-12 champion, especially if Oregon can keep it their feet. I think they're the best contender. But I would definitely think the Pac-12 champion would be looking at a spot in the top 4 at the end of the year. All right, let's go into the upsets now. There were a lot of them. We're going to cruise through these real quick. So we already talked about a couple of them. Oregon over Ohio State, Iowa over ISU. Sorry. Arkansas in a big upset over Texas. I didn't even list Texas versus Arkansas in my top 10 games of the week. I know it's a historic rivalry, but I just expected Texas to crush Arkansas. I didn't think it was going to be an interesting game. Well, Arkansas did the opposite, flipped the script on them, beat them 40-21, an embarrassment by Texas. Their Longhorns are still not back, and with them going into the SEC, yeah, they'll be recruiting SEC talent, but it's not like Texas has had a real issue competing for recruits. I mean, if you can't recruit at Texas in the Big 12, you're not going to recruit well in the SEC, especially when you're having to compete with other SEC schools for those recruits. I think it's going to be a lot of hard years for Texas. It's an interesting move, an interesting decision by Texas to move up into the SEC here. Maybe they saw the writing on the wall with the Big 12 refusing to expand a few years back, and instead petitioning the conference to allow them to play a conference championship, petitioning the NCAA to allow them to play a conference championship game without without 2 divisions, which they were allowed to, which, you know what, serves the Big 12 right that they are that they are now falling apart, because if they'd done that, they would have saved themselves and also allowed a lot of deserving group of 5 teams a chance to move up in the Power 5. So I look forward to everything that's been happening to the Big 12 right now, because they brought it on themselves, and really what their decision was bad for college for them in the long run and bad for college football. So they're finally making the right decision to expand, but it might be a little too late for the Big 12, especially only deciding to go up to 12 teams when 3 out of the 5 Power 5 conferences are already at 14 or more, with SEC moving up to 16. But I digress. All right, I do that a lot, and I understand that. But yeah, you know what? That's just what it is. I'm digressing right now about my digression. All right, BYU beating Utah, number 21 Utah, Stanford over number 14 USC, and then we had a couple of ones outside of that, the top teams in the country, but getting upset that were still surprise upsets. Florida State, after last week, almost beating Notre Dame. I mean, they were close in that game. They had that game. They gave it away. Lost to Jacksonville State, which FCS program, not a bad FCS program, but still an FCS school. Really, really not a good look here for Norvell in his second year at Florida State. A lot of people already put him on the hot seat. I don't put him there. I don't blame a coach for anything that happens within the first 3 years of them joining a program, because really everything at that point, they're still getting their team underneath them. They're still trying to institute their philosophy. Football changes, big changes in football happen slowly at a glacial pace, comparatively at least, at a glacial pace, and you have to give it time for them to put in. At that 3rd year, or starting out at that 3rd year, is right when you start to see a team being what that coach has developed it to be, and you don't really see a team being truly what that coach has put into molded into his image until the 4th season. So I think Florida State is definitely going to continue to get better. I don't know if they're going to get Jimbo Fisher level, but they're definitely going to get better moving forward. We're just going to but that loss to Florida State hurt a lot of FSU fans. I know that. And then this one was a big upset. almost to the same level as a FCS upset, as it were. Vanderbilt beating Colorado State. Vanderbilt dropped had an 11-game skid going before they managed to upset one of the worst teams in the Mountain West. Managed to get past CSU 24-21. So good job on them. But in my mind, that's another FCS upset there, because Vanderbilt, if they played in an FCS division, would probably go a lot of these FCS divisions would probably go 6-6. I mean, this is a garbage school that would be going, 2-10 in every conference in college football, not just the SEC. All right, so there were a couple near upsets. They could have been a lot worse for a lot of these big teams. Oklahoma State just barely beat out Tulsa by 5. Number 8 Notre Dame again struggled in a game I predicted that they would struggle in. I thought they would win it, but I did predict they would struggle in, and Toledo would be in there. They only beat Toledo by 3 points. Texas A&M only beat, like I said, Colorado by 3. And then number 22 Miami, I was calling an upset all the way in this one. I really thought that the I forgot what their mascot is. I think it's the Mountaineers. No, that's West Virginia. Anyhow, Appalachian State, I really thought that they had it in them to go in and take this game and win this game, and they almost did. They only lost by 2 points, but that was a near upset right there. So we've already talked a little bit about the FCS, but the FCS is doing really well this year, and I wanted to talk just really quickly about that and why that is, because I talked about the upsets last week, 4 upsets last week, and 2 more this week. So that gives a total of 6 FCS upsets over FBS teams within the first 2 weeks of the college football season. Now, I haven't gone through and looked at every single year over the last 20 years or something like that, so I can't put any factual data to this claim, but I believe that is the most FCS upsets over FBS in the first 2 weeks of a college football season ever. And if it isn't, it's at least the most notable, because there's been 3 Power 5 schools, and I cannot remember the last time that has happened. 3 Power 5 schools have lost in the first 2 weeks FCS teams, with most notably Washington last week, but then also FSU and Vanderbilt also losing to FCS programs. And there's a reason for that, folks. It's not that the FCS has suddenly turned into a power league at the same level FBS. No. The reason is FCS just got done playing their spring season. Because of COVID and the way that things worked out, they played a late season. They did a spring season versus doing a normal football season like the rest of the college football landscape. So they played a late season, played it in the spring. They just got done playing, I think it was only 4 months ago. I don't remember exactly the exact day of the exact month that the FCS championship game was. I believe it was in I think it was like April or something like that. But a lot of these other schools, a lot of these FBS programs, a lot of them haven't played since November. Because a lot of these schools didn't go to bowl games. They played truncated schedules overall anyway. And a lot of these teams didn't end up going to bowl games either because they just opted out or because the team they were supposed to play opted out. So a lot of these programs are really rusty, but the FCS is fresh. They are in tune. They're in rhythm. They're playing basically their second season in the calendar year. And you're seeing what you'd expect out of that. You're seeing seasoned football teams coming in and playing rusty teams who basically haven't played a real season in 2 years because of COVID. You don't really count that the way it turned out. A lot of teams not really playing a real season in 2 years. Rusty FBS teams going up against fresh, hot FCS schools, and this is exactly what you should have expected. So I'm not necessarily saying that some of you FBS programs, especially big ones like Washington, who took a loss to an FCS school, I'm not necessarily saying that you can take solace in that fact, but you can definitely appreciate why it's happening and why the FCS is rising to this level in this point in time. It's exciting to see. I would like to see a spring season for the FCS going forward anyway. I don't think they gain, besides the financial paydays, which I understand, but I don't think that's what college football should be about. I don't think as far as the games themselves, I don't think that nobody really wants to watch an FCS team play an FBS school. And the occasional upset happens, great. But it doesn't usually happen. Usually it's a massive beatdown, a massive drubbing. It doesn't benefit really any program. If FCS school beats an FBS school, great. They still got to win their conference to be able to go have a real shot at going into their playoffs. So you could beat, FCS program goes in and plays an FBS school with much bigger players, gets a lot of their players hurt and banged up, comes down and then ends up suffering that during their own regular season and not having as good a year as they would have normally, and it has no impact on their season. And then the FBS school, if they beat an FCS school, you might as well have played a bye week as far as the committee goes. They don't care if you played an FCS opponent. They don't even count that. And if you lose to them, that is it. Your season is donezo. You have nothing to play for of legitimacy at that point. You're never going to see a team that lost to an FCS school going to the playoffs or the New Year's Six. It just doesn't happen. Or at least not at New Year's Six at large part because of the broken system. You could lose, I guess technically you could lose to an FCS school and win your conference as a Power 5 and still get to go. It's ridiculous. I mean, we had a Wisconsin team a few years back that was like 8-4, got to go to the playoffs, to a New Year's Six, and the Boise State team that was 11-2, or it might have been 11-1 at that point, got left out. Yeah, it's insane and how broken the system is. But the main point is these games don't matter. They really don't. But you know what? We need football all year round. We really do. This break, this offseason is too long. The fact that we can only get football for basically 4 months out of the year is a travesty. And I would love to see a spring season. I think it would bring a lot more attention, a lot more money, a lot more focus to the FCS. It would identify them as the completely separate division of college football, which they are, and would allow them to build on that without the distraction of FBS. You know how many people would tune in to watch FCS program play on a Saturday night in the middle of May when you're not having to compete with big primetime games like Alabama versus LSU or something like that? It'd be awesome. So that's my little spiel right there. But great job on the FCS, doing well against the FBS, even though they're not necessarily getting it by honest means, having played that late season like that. But it is exciting to see. I always love an upset no matter what it is, so it's exciting to see those big teams going down to small schools like that. All right, my surprise teams of the week: BYU, San Diego State, Oregon, and Fresno State, the other FSU, not Florida State. BYU, big win against Utah that I predicted. Great job on them. It was a fantastic game. I love BYU coming out and winning like that. When BYU does good, it's better for Boise State because we have to play them later in the year. Most years, it's a good rivalry we've got going between those two schools. I'm not like a lot of Boise State fans that root against BYU and just hate them. I really don't harbor any hate against BYU. They've beaten us fair and square. You say fair and square. We didn't have our starting quarterback in for the last 2 losses at least. But you know what? They played well, and they did beat us fair and square. So it's I enjoy the rivalry, and I root BYU on, and this might hurt a lot of Boise State fans, and you might not like that, but I root BYU on the rest of the year because you know what, it doesn't make sense to root against a team that who your fate is tied to. So I don't necessarily like BYU, but I definitely wish them success, except in that Boise game, because what their success means our success. And you know what, I like the kind of players that that go to BYU. There a lot of times they're excited to play because a lot of times they've gone on mission, so they're coming in a little bit more mature. They're coming in a little bit more athletic because they've been allowed to develop. It's almost like a rookie NFL type of players coming in to play at this college level. They're excited to watch. Taysom Hill was one of my favorite college football athletes in the way that he played, and Zach Wilson did great things for BYU, even though he did great things against Boise. So BYU is doing great things this year, and I hope they keep winning up until that Boise game with a small drop off with a loss there and a win, continue winning after that. San Diego State played well, beat Arizona, big win for them and good for the Mountain West. And then Oregon, of course, we already talked about them. And Fresno State, even though they beat nobody this week, they proved that near loss to Oregon last week was a good loss. I think Fresno State should be ranked right now. They played Oregon tighter than Ohio State did. They looked really good. They are off to a 2-1 start right now after playing in week 0. They've crushed everyone they played except for Oregon. The transfer quarterback Hainer looks real. I always struggle with his name. The transfer quarterback Hainer looks really, really good for Fresno State. So I'm excited for Fresno State this year, and I think the rest of the college football should be too. The Bulldogs are back, and they're playing outstanding football. And they got a big game this week against UCLA. It's going to be exciting to see what they can do. All right, top 25. Who's out? Number 14 USC is out. you're done. You didn't make it the cut. You lost to Stanford. And even though you were number 14 in the nation and lost to your rival, the AP Top 25 does not care. And you lost an unranked team, and that's enough for them. You are out of here. I definitely think USC deserved to stay in the rankings, if just barely here, after losing to a rival like the Cardinals there, like Stanford. But they're out. Texas is out, deservedly so, after getting crushed by Arkansas. I might, you know what? That's unfair of me to say necessarily that they should be out after one loss to Arkansas when I just supported USC standing in. But I'm also looking at the quality of how these teams have played so far. And USC looked pretty good against San Jose State. And I did not think, even though Texas came out with a win, I didn't think they played well or to the level that they should have against Louisiana. So I think they were too high in the rankings already. And that Arkansas loss definitely, in my mind, deserves a kick out of the top 25, at least for now. Let's see what goes on in the Big 12 season. And then number 21, Utah is also out. In is Arkansas. Surprise. I think, like I said, it's AP poll. If this was the college football playoff poll, they wouldn't be. But the AP poll, it's who you love this week, who you hate next week. So Arkansas for now is in. Good luck, Arkansas. This is the same team that only, I think it was 2 seasons ago, lost to San Jose State. But good luck, Arkansas. We'll see how long you stay in the top 25. BYU, deservedly so, in the top 25. I think they probably should have been ranked last week, but definitely good win this week against last week, or this weekend that I am previewing. Good win this week against Utah, and they have a game next week against Arizona State where they can again make a good statement. And then Michigan, surprise. This is the surprise team for me. Not surprise team as well as they played, but surprised that they got ranked. Michigan, number 25, coming in after not really playing that well. I mean, they played, I think it was Central Michigan? No, Western Michigan. I think they played Western Michigan. So they played Western Michigan in their opening game and didn't look great in that, even though they ended up having good score towards the end. They didn't look good. And then they beat Washington, who just last week lost to Montana. And then Michigan comes in here at number 25 over UCF. That's who we're going to get right out. We'll just move right into this continuing section. Who should have been ranked? UCF, Fresno State. Both of those teams deserve to be ranked over Michigan, and especially UCF after the way that they played Boise State and the way that they went out and they played well against Bethune-Cookman, and they were basically right on the outside looking in. I just don't understand how Michigan gets ranked. Maybe we've got some Harbaugh love going on here in the AP poll. I do like Harbaugh, but I just don't think that Michigan has proved yet that they're going to be a top 25 team. I think this is definitely a Michigan team that's going to end up potentially with a 7-5 record down the road. So I just don't understand how they end up getting ranked here this early on after what the schedule that they've played, especially over UCF, with the way that they won against Boise State, looking very dominant in that game. And as I've said before, they should have won by more than they did. They just shot themselves in the foot. So it's an interesting move here by AP Top 25. But I definitely think that UCF should have been in over Arkansas, and I would have put Fresno State in over Michigan. The Mountain West as always gets hated on because nobody watches our games because they're so late, and because our conference leadership is garbage and refuses to promote our conference like the American Athletic Conference does. So there's a lot of reasons that the Mountain West doesn't get the spotlight, but Fresno State definitely deserved to be in the top 25 after their performance last week and the bookends against Connecticut and whatever terrible FCS school they played this week, but played well against both of them. All right, so too much. Who moved too much? Arkansas, we've already talked about it. Ranked, no way they should be. And again, Michigan the same. So yeah, they did play Western Michigan. I have it written right down here. And then Oklahoma, how is Oklahoma still a top 5 team? Can someone explain that to me? I have no idea. They moved up one spot after last week losing to Tulane and only dropping down. There's like 2 spots. They should have been out. They should have potentially been out of the top 10 after barely, considering who was in the top 10 and deserving teams there. After barely beating Tulane, they should have been appropriately punished and at least pushed out of the top 8. I think like 8 or 9 would have been a good spot for them. And then this week, after beating a nobody, they move up to number 4 in the nation. That is mind-boggling to me. I have no idea how Oklahoma right now, with the record that they played, you're not supposed to be predicting based on how teams are going to finish. You're supposed to be looking at what teams have played right now. And Oklahoma does not deserve to be in the top 5 right now. They definitely do not deserve to be there. Oregon only moving up. Oregon only moving up 8 from 12th to 4th. I think that Oregon. Sorry. I don't know what I'm saying here. I'm getting a different team. Rewind. There we go. All right, sorry. Oregon moving up 8 after beating Ohio State is a little too much for me. I think that Oregon played well in that game, but they did struggle against Fresno State. I've lifted Fresno State up, but they struggled against a group of 5 team, a good group of 5 team. But when you even struggling against a good group of 5 team and winning shouldn't get you this high in the rankings, even after beating Ohio State. This is not the Ohio State of past years. Stroud, I like Stroud, but he's definitely still developing. They really struggled. They did. If you watch that game, they really struggled against Minnesota, even though they came away with a win. And they definitely, with this loss to Oregon, proved that they were never a top 5 team. They were never a playoff team, and they should not have been ranked as high as they should. And the AP voters should take that into account. Now, Oregon, should they be in the top 10? I think so. But should they have moved up to 4th? I just don't see it. I think Oregon should be, maybe 6th or 7th right now. But I don't think that after a win over the kind of the Ohio State team that they beat, it's not a flip-flop. Oregon beating Ohio State doesn't mean that Oregon is awesome. It means that Ohio State was never as good as people thought they were in the first place, and that Oregon is probably a little better than people thought they were in the first place. It shouldn't be a complete switch. That's the AP poll for you right now, and especially now that that we have the college football playoff poll going on. The AP votes really doesn't mean anything. Every AP voters seem to take the poll less seriously than they did if they ever took it seriously in the past. So definitely some weird moves there. Too little here. Iowa only up 5 after dominant wins over Indiana and Iowa State. Here's the team I meant to say. Iowa State, I think, should be a top 4 team right now. Coming from where they were to where they're going, I mean, I think they started out 18th and now they're up to oh shoot, I should have written it down. But sorry, coming from where they were 18th, and moving up to being a oh man, I should have written down I'm blanking on the exact ranking that they're at right now. I believe they're at number 7 or 6. Anyhow, sorry. Iowa, after the dominant wins that they've had against Indiana and Iowa State, they should have moved up a little bit more than they did. That's the main point here. They should have moved up a little bit more than they did. They've proven with those wins, the way that they won in those games, that they're legitimate playoff contenders, and they should be. And they have probably of all the teams right now currently sitting in the top 10. The 2 wins that Iowa State has are better than any of the wins that are combined, at least, that are of any other team in the top 10. And they should be sitting right now at least at number 4 with the way that they've played. Exciting season for Hawkeye fans. Going to have to see how they do going forward in the year. And then Ohio State, like I said, only dropping down 6 after the loss. Oregon moved up too much, but Ohio State didn't drop enough. Ohio State should be out of the top 10 right now after a poor performance against Minnesota that did result in a win, but then a terrible performance against Oregon. They should be out of the top 10. They are not the team that a lot of people thought they were coming into this season. And they're going to have to prove a lot to get back into it, but they should have to prove that. It shouldn't be given to them, and they're definitely being given a lot of leeway that a lot of other teams probably wouldn't right now. A lot of bias being put towards the Buckeyes right now. All right, quick hitters, and we'll be done. I'm already at 32 minutes, but I am shorter in this video than I was last week, so good on me. So quick hitters on here. So Air Force beating Navy, probably a game a lot of people didn't watch, but that's always big for the Commander Chiefs trophy. Air Force is just going to get past Army, who beat them last year, so that's going to be a tough one. But Air Force is just going to get past Army, and they'll be able to get that Commander Chiefs trophy. A nice win by Air Force, 23-3. UCF Athletic Director and Administration showing high character this week after their first game, having some of the student section not necessarily behaving as they should have against a lot of Boise State fans. The UCF the UCF fans overall reacted out against that in an incredible way, calling it out, saying they needed to do better, and the athletic director and administration at UCF did the right thing, came out and said, let's show respect. And by all accounts, the game against Bethune-Cookman, it did not happen what happened that first week there, but just overall environment there was much more welcoming and respectful than it was the first week. So I have coming into that UCF matchup, I had a lot of bitter feelings, I think, against UCF over the years, with UCF coming in and taking that New Year's Six away from Boise State a couple seasons, I think, unfairly. But UCF is achieving at a high level after interacting with their fan base, not their students, but interacting with their fan base and seeing their administration. I have a lot of respect. I have a huge amount of respect, and I have much better feelings towards UCF UCF than I did prior to that Boise State matchup. I would like to see those two schools play each other a lot more often. Top schools in the group of 5. Incredibly excited for that matchup when UCF comes to play Boise State in 2023. Going to be a Big 12 team coming to Boise State now. So that's awesome. Congratulations to UCF moving up into the Big 12. Incredibly excited for you. You guys deserve it. Your fan base and your leadership showed high character. So great job on you. So that's my second quick hitter there. Third quick hitter, Mountain West now has 3 group of 5 wins. That's more group of 5 after San Diego State beat Arizona and Nevada beat Cal and Utah State beat Washington State last week. The Mountain West has 3 group of 5 wins, which is more than any any group of 5 conference out there, including the American Athletic Conference, who doesn't have any group of 5 wins yet. The MAC and the Sun Belt each have 1 win against Kansas and Georgia Tech, but those teams aren't really even Power 5 the way that they play. So right now, the Mountain West is holding the 3 legitimate Power 5 wins and proving to be a very strong conference. I think they're set. The rankings don't show it because, like I said, there's a lot of bias towards against the Mountain West, against East Coast bias in general, against the West Coast teams. But the Mountain West shaping up to be the top conference in the group of 5 this year. And then week 3, this is a big chance. This is going to be the make it or break it, prove it week. I just came out right now and said the Mountain West is the top conference in the group of 5. Well, this is the week to prove it. Both the Mountain West and the American Athletic Conference play 6 Power 5 matchups between them, 6 apiece. So 12, I guess, between them, 6 apiece. And this is going to be the chance for the American Athletic Conference to get back in the running here with the Mountain West for Power 5 wins and to really prove which of these conferences is the top conference in college football. This will be a real statement week for both of them. So lots to watch this week. Make sure that if you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe, but make sure you watch my next video. I'm going to make it right after I make this one, where I preview the top 10 matchups in week 3 of the college football season. It's going to be another outstanding week with a lot of opportunities for a group of 5 teams to go out and get some big upsets, specifically in the Mountain West and the American Athletic Conference. Thank you for watching this video. Like I said, if you like these videos, make sure you like and subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue.